In 2020, the Yukon government released Our Clean Future, a Yukon strategy for climate change, energy, and a green economy. As part of this plan, Yukon government partnered with BYTE Empower Youth Society to create a Yukon Youth Panel on climate change. In 2021, the first youth panel cohort delivered recommendations to Yukon government on Our Clean Future. The following year, the second cohort built on these ambitions through capacity building and engaging other Yukon youth. These are our visions for the future.
I think the biggest thing that motivated me was just in school and in life, we learn so much about the problems in the world and about how big of an issue climate change is. And it feels often overwhelming and not knowing where my piece is or where I fit into solving it. And the youth panel felt like an opportunity to be part of a solution.
It's something I wanted to learn even more about and then hopefully bring it back to my community to share with everyone.
It's often talked about globally, how it's affecting places, but you don't always learn about how it's actually affecting you and your life and your community.
I study biology, and I feel like climate change is a very important aspect of what we study in biology, especially in terms of ecology, because climate change is changing everything we know about the land, everything we know about animals, everything that we thought we knew about the environment around us, and everything's kind of being turned upside down, and it's all happening very fast as well, so it's like a big struggle to kind of learn as much as we can, as fast as we can.
Well, the first panel I knew was all about providing recommendations for the government, and it felt like a direct way to give an opinion to the government.
I really gained this interest in what it means to be standing up for the environment and having a voice, and that's what really motivated me to be part of the panel.
I wanted to also meet up with some other youth that were kind of like me, that were really passionate about that, and get to have discussions with them, kind of see what they are doing to fight climate change.
A way that climate change is affecting me personally is through the salmon. My family and I haven't been able to harvest for a few years now, and it feels like I'm losing a part of my identity slowly, and it makes me sad because it's something still new to me, and it's something I hope that can be still passed on after me.
Just growing up in a small community, I did not expect climate change to be so drastic, and seeing the water so high that it could affect my grandma's house or my auntie's house.
Mostly it's climate anxiety and eco-anxiety, I think. Just hearing we're bombarded by information all the time, and so I think just the indirect effects from that is one of the biggest impacts.
There's always talk of oh, the planet's only got till 2050 or whatever, and it's it can be kind of alarming. I don't know what's going to happen to my future, and that's a big thing that I think about often because it kind of stresses me out.
And that can be quite the feeling, to feel like there's all this weight, and if we aren't all pulling our weight, then we're going to end up with a catastrophe. And it feels like that's really hard when all the systems are built against trying to make change.
This summer with a lot of forest fires, it was scary because they issued the travel advisories. So that being said, you're not really encouraged to go outside and go out camping and hiking and exploring, so it kind of affects how I like to live my life and what makes me happy.
Some of the deepest effects I feel from it is often trying to prevent it, trying to do my part. I think that a lot of people will sort of take the idea of, oh, climate change doesn't affect me because they can sort of ignore it. But I find, every day when I'm choosing how to do things, I try and take a little bit of the whole, how is this affecting the environment when I do it?
I'm joining the panel to kind of help educate other people on climate change and hopefully like spread the word that it's a real issue that needs to be focused on more heavily.
What I'm trying to do is really take every opportunity I can and say yes and try new things and find what I'm passionate about, because passion is where we're going to find the most change. And if people aren't interested in doing it, then not much is going to happen.
I've been participating in a lot of connected movements. I've been organizing Fridays for Future protests.
I really like to talk about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and just how interconnected some issues or social issues are with environmental issues. I did a presentation in a classroom in the school about that and like a little project there to kind of get the kids interested.
This summer, I had a summer job where I got to take some youth out and do conservation projects all around the Yukon all summer.
I actually worked for a private sector company as like an environmental student, so kind of learning through different experiences and not sticking to one path.
I think just like showing and like talking about the fact that I care about this, I hope that it also, you know, resonates with other people, and that maybe they will also think like, oh, like people actually do care about this.
My visions for the Yukon in 2050 include a lot of education reform. I think education is a really valuable way of combating climate change. You can't know how to take care of something if you don't know why it's important and you don't like learn to respect it and value it.
I'd like to see like the implementation of the youth recommendations on Our Clean Future. I think that would be really awesome. As well as the Yukon First Nations Climate Action Fellowship. They put out their first draft of the Reconnection Vision and Action Plan.
Hopefully by 2050 that we find a solution to reducing the amount of CO2 we put into within the ecosystem.
I hope that in 2050, the Yukon government is collaborating more meaningfully with First Nations governments and facilitating their own climate change action, right? So I don't think climate change action needs to always just come from the Yukon government, and I don't think they need to control all of the energy and, you know, stuff like that. I feel like that's something that should be, and yeah, like just should be shared between the First Nations governments and the Yukon government, and I think that's also a big part of that is also acknowledging Indigenous sovereignty.
Proportional representation, because I feel like that would change the way that politics in the Yukon work, because right now I don't personally think it's great, but with proportional representation I feel like it would be a lot more equitable because it would give people the chance to share their ideas in a way that would count.
In 2050, I feel like the Yukon could be vastly different. We could be much further ahead than many other places to the south, just because we aren't as far down the wrong track as a lot of our southern Canadian cities are. With such a small population, I feel like we have a much higher chance of convincing everyone and also making the small changes.
I hope by 2050 the salmon will make a comeback like they never started to disappear. I hope it's even better than it was like 20 years ago. And that I'm back in home at fish camp with my family, fishing salmon and just practicing our culture.
More collaboration with NGOs, local grassroots organizations, giving more power to Indigenous governments.
I think that it's important that we start to transition to a more sustainable way of living.
Leaving that society where we're so dependent on cars and things that produce carbon for transportation.
The future generations have it more easier for what we're like trying to fight for, and that hopefully that my rights are still going to be valid by then.
Just to be more resilient to climate change and be less reliant on the rest of the world.
A Yukon that is much more self-sustaining.
I feel like the Yukon is such a community right now, and we're seeing that there's such a large growth in our population. And I feel like the worst thing for climate change in the Yukon would be to lose the sense of community we have here and helping each other out and working together.